All right, welcome to the Heady Vermont live stream. It is Monday, March 11th, and we've got a very special guest tonight, Mr. Billy Greer, VIP in the house. We've got a huge studio audience. Make some noise, guys. Give yourselves a round of applause. For real this time. Big thank you to Jam Creative for hosting us. We've got Sean Simonetti directing, masterful job. Eli Favreau, his last live stream, producing. Thank you guys for coming in tonight. So, we are getting a little bit of a late start here tonight, so I'll plug a few events real quick, and then we're going to hop right into our interview.
Sure.
You're the main attraction here, Billy. These guys hear me talk all the time, way too much. So, quick events and updates. First, want to give a shout out to Pepperlee CBD, our newest business partner to join. Tonight's obviously brought to you by Greenleaf Central, and I think you guys are carrying Pepperlee CBD, or I'm sure you will be soon now that I've said it on the air, spoken into existence. So appreciate the cross collaboration here. As always, members, partners, thank you for your support, helping us do what we do. This Sunday, St. Patrick's Day, Bud and Brunch in Winooski. That's right, we're putting it out to everybody. 101 Main Street in Winooski. Stop by. We're going to have a great time. We'll be serving up smoothies, non-infused, private event, 21 plus, but live DJ. We're going to have art there. We're going to be doing a joint rolling contest, giveaways, just in general, a fun scene, good Sunday vibe. So noon this Sunday, check on Facebook. If you're a member, send me a message, and we'll make sure that you get the invite. More importantly, let's get right into it, Billy. I got a political insider update that we'll do at the end, but I want to start by letting you introduce yourself. I've said a couple things online, you know, legend. I've shared some news articles about you, but Billy Greer here in the flesh yourself. You're a local guy, right? Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, I was born and brought up in Williston, Vermont. My parents had a successful dry cleaning business. And, I wanted to thank you, by the way, for having me here tonight. It was very nice.
Yeah. Well, thank you to Greenleaf Central.
Greenleaf Central. And my friend Laura, too.
Yes.
And Laura.
And Laura as well.
Yeah, they're good friends of mine. They asked me to do this. This is way outside the normal. I usually kind of stay out of the whole scene now that I was away for so long. And
yeah. Long-time independent media supporter, though. I read your interview with Peter Frayne. May you rest in peace.
Yeah, Peter was a good friend of ours.
Was excellent. So, yeah, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Great guy, too.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, it was hilarious. I mean, I got to know him a little bit Channel 17 days, but yeah. So, all right. Well, so obviously, clearly local guy. We've got all of our friends here in studio, too. And I got a ton of messages when we put this out and said that we were interviewing you. You know, big get for us to get to talk to you a little bit about your background, a little bit about what you think's going on in cannabis today. You know, you're somebody who was incarcerated for a long time for importing cannabis into Canada, which now is legal, actually, per the Canadian government. So let's get into it. You know, we talked a little bit about your local guy. You were a big sports star, right? You went to high school right here in Chittenden
I went to
County?
Rice High School.
Rice High School, right? And you were a football player from...
I was.
Correct, right? Okay, so you're going along, Billy Greer, life's happening. Well, let's get a sense of what high school was like back at that point in time here in Vermont. I wanted to talk a little bit about this because, you know, what was the cannabis culture like? We think about the 80s being kind of crazy, and, you know, I'm not going to ask you to reveal your full age, but maybe you can give us kind of a little insight. What was it like in high school? Were people smoking pot regularly?
You know, I went to Rice and graduated in '67, and really marijuana was just kind of coming in with the '60s. It was just really kind of happening and stuff, and it wasn't a big deal in high school. But as soon as I graduated from high school and went into college, I went to Champlain College, then it became really predominant. Everybody was starting to smoke marijuana, and it was becoming more open and more acceptable in society, and it's kind of how the whole thing started out.
Yeah, so I mean, Burlington, late 60s, you know, sounds like a pretty wild time and place to be. What was kind of your introduction to, you know, to cannabis? Just sort of smoking, like high school party? What was the first time you smoked?
The first time I smoked, I was at, actually I was older. I was like 18. I was at Champlain College, and somebody had a hash joint. It was the first thing I ever smoked, and I fell in love with hash immediately.
A little foreshadowing here for folks. This will reoccur. Okay.
That's where I fell in love with hash. Yeah. But I remember when I got in the business, my brother Freddie got arrested at the airport. Somebody had shipped him some Oaxacan, 4 ounces of Oaxacan from Mexico, and he went to pick it up at the airport, and he got popped at the airport. And he called me and said, "I'm in jail, but I've got like 30 pounds of pot sitting in my apartment. So I called my brother Ricky, and we went and we broke into my brother's apartment and got all the pot out of there in case the cops wanted to come there and raid the place. So we took it out to a farm in Williston, and we dumped it all out, the 30 pounds. And Freddie got out of jail. It was just a citation. And, and he was glad that we went up and did that, him and his partner. And they said, wow, that was fantastic. Thanks for doing that. You know, and you guys threw it away. And they said, but that was worth like $6,000 or $7,000. They wrote it off and everything. And my brother Ricky and I looked at each other. We said, holy moly. So we went and got the pot and sold it. didn't tell my brother. And that's how I started out in the pot business. It was strictly about the money and the freedom of not having to talk to people out there in society and pay my taxes and all this other stuff. It was a freedom. Yeah. It was a freedom, man, that I just enjoyed all my life.
Well, and that really seems like to be kind of at the heart of it, because, you know, you did have kind of a conventional straight job here, but, you know, like you said, you sort of got a little bit of taste for this. I mean, relatively easy cash. You're a super affable guy, you know, as evidenced by all the friends we've got here and, you know, anybody who's met you. And like I said, we got a lot of messages from people who met you in a lot of different circumstances, too. You know, so you got this network, you're a local guy, things are going pretty smoothly. How does it get to that next step? And I mean, I guess you experience kind of the high right off the bat, but we think about, you know, back in the day, 70s, you know, Nixon era, you know, pot being super illegal and serious consequences. So how were you kind of thinking about the risk? You know, I mean, were you just young and energetic?
And crazy. Well, the risk was always there, but law enforcement was lax back then. They almost had to stumble upon something or get a tip from someone that cooperated to really find out. And we had a very tight circle. We kept it very, very tight. They didn't know what we were doing for years. We were doing international smuggling and smuggling the Canadian border. And they didn't have a clue. They were shocked when we lost the 54 tons up in Canada. But it really started out, I just started selling ounces of pot. And then I moved from ounces to quarter pounds to half pounds to 5 pounds, 5 pounds to 10 pounds, 10 pounds to 1,000 pounds, 1,000 pounds to tons. Then we went up to multi-tons. And I remember that I met this guy. He was like my mentor. His name was Johnny Bannon. He would love it that I'm talking about him. And he was like one of the largest smugglers in New England. Any load that came into New England, Johnny Bannon would have it. And he came up and stayed at my house one time. And I said, Johnny, this is when I was younger. I said, you know, I'd like to make $1 million someday. And he said, it's so easy to make $1 million. The hardest thing is to keep the $1 million. So I said, well, how do you do it? He says, by keeping your word. If you keep your word, you will be brought up through the ranks. So my partner, Stevie, and I kept our word for many, many years, and for some reason it worked. We just were brought up and got into this highest level of hashish international smuggling on the planet. You know, it was by keeping your word.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, and
that's really the bottom line.
Well, and so, you know, I mean, what you're describing, it sounds pretty straightforward, you know, ounces, quarter pounds, up to a couple 5 pounds. But, and I know we talked a little bit. It sounds like, you know, this is like your life is a movie. And it sounds like it literally maybe someday.
Well, there's some, we're in talks right now with some people, from the Hollywood over there in that area that are talking about doing a movie right now.
I mean, because honestly, I put this on Instagram. I couldn't make this, it's crazier than real. I wish I was creative enough to make up this kind of story, the life you've lived. You know, help us sort of visualize when things are increasing, right? Like we think about the movies. You know, are people meeting at sort of hotels, you know, or are people meeting at, what's it look like in New England? And not talking about the cross-border, we'll talk about, you know, that next level, but, you know, sort of, what is it? Because I think people get the wrong idea, and some people who watch this have purchased cannabis or sold it before. But, you know, what's that look like at that point in time? And not, I guess, a lot of fear from the cops, but where's this going down, and sort of who are the characters you guys are dealing with?
Well, you always increased your sales and met people by keeping your word. Someone would introduce somebody to somebody. And all the deals went down back in the days, mostly in hotels and motels. But one of my favorite spots was graveyards. I'd always go to graveyards because nobody was there filming you or, you know.
Yeah, much cheaper rate too, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, they don't charge you by the night.
Yeah, so that was always one of the best spots to do some movements back in the days, you know, and nobody ever bothered graveyards.
And was most of this stuff, you know, being grown by farmers out in the backwoods of Vermont? Is this shit coming up from?
I started out in with Colombian pot back in the 70s, and it was always smuggled from Colombia to the United States. And then I got tied up with some Jamaican friends of mine from the Zion Coptic Church of Jamaica. and they used to smuggle plane loads into Florida, and I used to go pick up loads down there from those guys. So it really went from Colombian to Jamaican to Mexican, and then it came Sensimillion. When they all the loads back in the days used to have seeds in it. The Colombian pot, you know, you'd get a 30-pound bale and you'd have 4 or 5 pounds of seed.
Yeah.
So you'd have to eat the seeds and stuff. And eventually there was actually 2 brothers from LA that bought some Sensimillion seeds many years ago, and I don't remember their names, but they went to Mexico with this vision to grow seedless pot. And that's what started the Sensimillion movement.
Right.
And it just morphed into that. And then Colombian pots nobody wanted it anymore because of the seeds, so they started doing cocaine, and Colombia became a cocaine mecca. And Mexico kind of had to start doing other things because of their city pot, and they started growing the Sensimillion, became very popular.
And this is straight out of, I mean, if anybody's seen the show Narcos, the Mexico series kind of chronicles this and like dramatized this in probably a crazy way, but you know, being there when it changed over from, you know, seeded weed to Sensimilla, just immediately, were more people turning on or just having a better time when they were smoking? Was it noticeable quality improvement?
Much better.
Yeah.
Yeah, night and day. Plus the weight of the seeds. It cost you money when you had to pay for the seeds.
Right.
So there was kind of a business deal, and then people started smoking the Sensimillion. It became very good herb. And that's what they smoke today here in this country.
Right. I mean, I think the idea of finding seeded weed, it's like, especially if you're under a certain age, like people are going to grow up having no idea that there once were seeds in weed that people got all the day, all the time, right? So, you know, at this time, were people kind of growing too? That wasn't really a part of it?
No, there wasn't any going on at all.
Really?
No, it was all just importation, strictly.
Well,
until Mexico started doing the Sensimilla, then that's really when it started morphing up into this country, and people started growing it up here.
Right. And you hear about people in California who went to Pakistan, you know, and places in the Middle East to find, you know, the kind of, you know, indicas that would grow in higher latitudes. But I guess, so getting back to, you know, the bud, we're talking about your graveyards, your, you know, hotel rooms. Eventually you meet someone, and again, back in the day, for people that didn't grow up in Vermont, I mean, I still remember pre-9/11, crossing the border from Vermont to Quebec used to be really no big deal at all. I mean, even in like the 90s, hard to imagine. And especially in Vermont, you got a place like Alberg where it's like one guy with a wooden drawbridge. So you kind of got to set the scene and imagine this, but even earlier, right? So how do you get approached about, you know, getting involved in Canada and sort of going international? How does that process happen?
Well, geez, it's funny. I was working for my dad's sporting goods business, Mills and Greer's. And
I remember it well.
Yeah. There was a fellow that came in from Canada, Jerry Shapiro, and God rest his soul. And he left my brother and I a joint. And after he left, we smoked it. I said, my gosh, it was a hash joint from Canada, and it was just fabulous. It just blew us away. And he came back down again a few days later, and I realized he was trying to see if we could get him some herb down here. So we started doing some pot business with him, and he would come down in a taxi cab. He would fake that he was a cab driver, so he would rent a taxi cab for the day and come down. He'd stuff the back seat full of pot and start driving it up. And he started getting so big that it was too much pot to put in the car. So I said, you know what, I'll smuggle it for you. So that's how I started smuggling the Canadian border. I just started figuring things out and how to do it. So
how much weight are you you talk about filling up a taxi cab. This is like take the seat cushions out and,
you take the back seat
put some bales
30, 40 pounds in.
30, 40 pounds.
30, 40 pounds.
You're hearing our prices are going up probably progressively, right? I mean, throughout this time. You're kind of in the boom time of people kind of getting turned on, and like you mentioned, Sensimilla.
Well, back then you could get a lot more money in Canada too.
Yeah, really. Yes. So it was a much better
market.
Really.
Yeah.
I mean, you would have.
They had their money together too. They were very organized, very professional up in Canada. They're really honorable people too.
Yeah.
They would come with suitcases full of money.
God, they're so damn nice. As Canadians, it's funny. All the stereotypes stereotypes are true, right? It's just the nicest smugglers on the world are up in Canada.
They are.
So I mean, these guys, 30, 40 pounds, casual, you start driving up. Are you, we're not going to give away any trade secrets. Clearly, don't want to spoil the ending. They figured this out eventually. But, what were kind of the techniques back then? And, were there dogs who are around? I mean, where you just have to vacuum seal, you know, wrap everything up real tight, like?
Not really. Not
you know,
back in those days.
We were pretty
loose.
Yeah, just have a smile on your face and tell them you're going to a Bruins game.
I remember I had a 75 Chevy Blazer, and it had exhaust headers on it. And I used to take asbestos and pack the front of the engine up with the asbestos. And then I would load it full of hash or pot, and I could put 100, 200 pounds in the compartment of the engine compartment. And then I would just wait for the hockey game, or I'd wait for a baseball game, and I'd bring a baseball glove with an Expos baseball shirt. And I'd drive up to the border, and they'd look at you, and they'd go through, pretty much. So that's how it kind of started out. And then I got involved with my partner, Stevie Hutchins, who was also a smuggler. And he already had routes set up in Canada and stuff. And I started working for him. I started doing smuggles, and I was always smuggling in vehicles. And I started working for him, and then we became partners, and I started learning the routes, and we started backpacking and doing airplane trips, boat trips.
Wow.
Pretty much did it all.
And again, like you know, driving back and forth again, like you didn't even need a passport.
No.
You know, back then, and there was barely anybody at the border. So, you know, you talk about it casually, and I think it was it seems like it was, you know, if you had the connections and, you know, frankly, the balls to do it, you know, and were confident and, you know, kind of cool enough that wasn't really a huge issue. You cross the imaginary line, and then, you know, it gets real flat, and then half hour later you're in Montreal.
Well, people used to say to me, geez, how can you get across the international border without getting caught? Or aren't you scared? And I used to say, well, listen, draw an imaginary line from the border of Vermont 90 miles that way. Okay, do you think it's sometime during the day you can cross that imaginary line without getting caught? And that's really what it was like back then, working the border.
Well, and that's another good point. I mean, you talk about the sort of remote past that you guys are coming across, and you know, those of us in this audience all live in Vermont, so we can kind of imagine this. But you know, there's really a lot of pretty desolate stretches out there where you've got maybe a farmer's got 400, 500, 1,000 acres. You know, are you guys going in there with snowshoes and, you know, dog sleds or ATVs or snowmobiles?
All of them.
You know, all the above,
all above.
Whatever can carry the most.
Yeah.
And then, you know, planes seems like it's a lot more complicated, right? Because you got to have some fake paperwork probably at some point.
Well, no.
Or you just come down, you just land shallow enough.
No, we actually push it out. We throw it out to a team that's catching it down below.
Okay, so you could just drive, you know, you're flying over, you take a little loop over the line, drop it off.
About 30 miles in. I remember the first time we did it, I think we packed up about 70 pounds of hash, and a plane picked me up down in, I think it was in Middlebury Airport. It was about 4 in the morning. They picked me up and we loaded up the plane, and I was the pusher, I was the kicker, and Steve and the crew was up on the other side of the border. And we decided we were going to drop it. We had a railroad track that goes right into Canada from the U.S., so we decided we'd get the plane as low as we could and fly right up across the railroad track and try to drop it as close to the railroad tracks as we could. So it's about 4:30, 4:45 in the morning. The sun's coming up, and I'm in the back getting ready to kick it out, and the pilot goes down, and we're real close, and I see Steve and the boys down there, and I start pushing out these bales of hay, and one of them was about a 20-pound brick landed on the railroad track. Well, we never thought to check the railroad schedule, and there was a high train, there was a high-speed train that came through and hit that thing and blew it all over the place. That was one of our crazy stories in the days.
I mean,
we had many of those.
I can't imagine the train conductor. They get off up there and they're like, "What the hell did we hit?" You know?
Yeah.
Holy shit.
There was quite a few stories like that.
Well, I mean, again, like what that scene you're describing is both from Trailer Park Boys, the TV series, and like Grand Theft Auto, the video game. Like literally, this is, you know, wild stuff.
Yeah.
You know, and who'd have thought, like, you know, the Bring Back the Expos, you know, people, Major League Baseball interrupted international drug trafficking just by getting rid of the Expos, which isn't a good argument for us. I want to see them bring it back,
right,
you know, for other purposes.
They were
now
fun.
we can go up there and legally smoke weed and go to an Expos game separately. God, well, you know, so this is, again, clearly this goes on for a period of time, you know, right? And like you said, it's keeping your word, you know. Are you dealing with, again, the higher and higher kind of you get too? Like, what's the person you're dealing with? And I guess, you know, what's the fear factor like? You know, because we're talking, I mean, this hash does have a lot of high street value, right? And at some point you got to exchange hash for cash, right? So you have some serious risk. I mean, what was that like? And
I was really never uncomfortable. We always dealt with people that knew people. We were like hippies, conscious, honorable people. We were good business people. We told the truth to our. So that's how it kind of morphed. People kind of attract people in the business that are honorable. And if you're not honorable, you don't get to the level that we get to.
Yeah.
So to get there, you have to be very honorable. And that's how we worked our way up, you know.
Yeah. And in those times, I mean, except for if you're that poor train conductor, any kind of close calls with, you know, people, associates getting in trouble. I mean, I guess that's kind of the risk, right? Somebody else gets popped lower down the chain, and then they, you know, they sell out whoever they can. During those times, any kind of real close calls?
Not really.
You know?
No.
Yeah, just well-oiled machine. Well, the machine gets bigger, right? So, you know, you're keeping your word, you're meeting more people, making these connections. It sounds like it's a relatively professional environment. At what point, you know, what's that larger level when it gets to be, I guess vehicles that are bigger than you and one person can run alone, right? Then you get into the real smuggling where you get to large weight. So what was kind of the first experience that was that next level scale, and then sort of how does it?
We actually jumped real quick when we started bringing in freighter loads from Afghanistan and Pakistan.
Wow, because you have to have your own supply if you want to make money, right? So you guys are now going straight to Afghanistan and Pakistan. What years is that?
Our partners were purchasing it in it's called the Khyber Pass region of Pakistan and Afghanistan, and it's a very lawless area up there, and it's really no government people there, and the hash people control the whole area. And then they would pack up camels and bring it down to the Gulf of, I think it was the Gulf of Aden. I can't remember where we picked it up. But anyways, they would, the Army would bring the hash to us and load the freighter. And
the Army.
The Army.
The Army.
Pakistan Army.
So the Pakistani Army. I mean, because this is before, again, different time. Khyber Pass now is like, I think, known more for, you know, terrorism activities and, you know, being a haven, like you said, lawless place. But, you know, you also hear that it was relatively stable parts of it with that kind of hash trade functioning. So military's literally bringing it down from the mountains, escorting it in, and then there's somebody, you know, there. Now, without implicating, you know, people who haven't already been implicated, how big is give me a sense of scale for a freighter load. And is this a company that's owned by somebody who smuggles all the time? Or, you know, all the most of us have is like movies to go on for frame of reference, right?
Yep.
You know, and so you think that, all right, there's the Russian captain and somebody gives him an envelope and then there's a fake paper for a, you know, cargo S-31. How does it actually work?
Well, our Dutch partners own the freighter.
Okay.
They were very wealthy, very successful. They were the largest hash dealers on the planet. And this all came out in our court documents and things, so I can talk about it. And one of our partners was the Prime Minister of Pakistan. Her husband was one of our partners. So, and she got assassinated.
Benazir Bhutto, I think, right?
Yes, yeah. So, and he was a partner, and then he became the Prime Minister of Pakistan after his wife got assassinated.
I mean, it's wild when you talk about that scale.
Well, you have to be, to move it on that level, you have to be involved with the government. You have to be involved in the top rank, the president or someone up there in that rank, to move things out of a country like that. Yeah. And we happened to connect through our Canadian people, and with our Dutch connections, they connected us in, and Steve and I basically were in charge of the offloads. You know, bring the freighters over, offload it, and bring it to a safe place. And
so you guys would go meet the boats overseas and travel back with them, or you guys would meet them up?
Yes, well, both. In '89, I jumped on a freighter in, where was I then? In Rotterdam, and came over with 34 tons and offloaded that up in the Gulf of St. Lawrence very successfully.
Yeah. Now, what does that look like if you're talking freighter in the Gulf of St. Lawrence?
Well, it was a big boat.
yeah, 34 tons. I mean, that's how many shipping containers is that for reference?
Well, what we did was there's 3 major bunkers on a ship for fuel, and we took the middle bunker and emptied it, and then ran pipes from the first bunker through the empty one to the third one, so they still have their fuel for the ship, and then we loaded up the middle bunker with the 34 tons. Through the galley, we drill down through, we jackhammer down through the floor, and fill it all up, and then seal it. And then it sat on the water for 2 years because Saddam Hussein attacked Kuwait. So we had to sit on the water for 2 years with that 34 tons sitting in there. And
it's a little nerve-wracking, maybe, you know?
Yeah. Well, they were boarding ships because of the war that broke out, and they were, looking for arms and things like that. So we had to park the ship we didn't, but our Dutch people did, for a couple of years. And then we brought it over and worked out well.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and then, this operation, we got, barrels coming in. Where does it all go? I mean, I guess we've got, clearly like the pipeline into the U.S. from Pakistan. It was through Montreal. Is this like the French connection? Is this going down to New York?
Well, so we did smuggle some to the United States, but really Canada could
that was really the main...
Yeah, Canada could absorb most of the market up there.
Wow.
They had a huge hash market back in those days.
Yeah.
And some of it came down here. Not a lot, but some.
Yeah, so it really is, a Canadian, international operation. A lot of this taking place in Canada.
Well, the hashish culture is very big in Europe, and the Europeans in Canada, where it wasn't so big in the United States.
Yeah. And what was it like, what was that kind of hash culture, sort of like back then? I mean, in Quebec, it's always been kind of laissez-faire, I think, right? And way out west. So similar thing, it was always pretty relaxed in Montreal back in the day.
Very much so.
Yeah.
And the Canadians always rolled it with tobacco.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. So really straight European style.
Yeah. Yeah, very much so. They had a great market up there.
I bet. I mean, and are there, you guys are at the size that you're probably controlling most of the market.
Probably all of it back then.
Wow.
Pretty much.
And I mean, so is it literally if Saddam's locked up, does the price go up for everybody across all of Canada for 6 months, or or something? There's enough there, and it stays pretty steady. Because this what it really sounds like is just a large conglomerate. This could be any wholesale company in the world, and it seems like it's just the extra kind of security that you guys had to take, right? So we're going through. Things are, like you said, 34 tons successfully delivered. When does it start to sort of unravel? Because again, I don't want to spoil the ending here, but it didn't always work out. There were some consequences at some point, right?
Well, yes, yeah.
What was sort of the...
Well, we were contracted in 91, I think it was 91, to bring in 200 tons of hash. So we had a contract to do that summer. And the first load that came in was 64 tons, but we had a problem with the offload. And I can explain what happened with the offload problem.
Yeah, sure. If anybody's watching this, they definitely want to know.
We had a freighter, and it was called the Giant 4, and it was towing a barge. And there's only 4 of these barges in the world. What these barges are made for, they sit 30 feet off the water. And you open the valves on them, you sink them until they're 3 feet from the water. And we had containers on the barge. And so instead of being 30 feet up off the ground, off the water, we would be down to 3 feet. And then we had flotation barrels and rafts that we'd just push into the water and just drive the hash right into shore. Real simple and easy.
Yeah.
But because of the Kuwait War, the boat sat on the water for 2 years, and we had a Filipino crew. And the engineer, the only one on the ship that knew how to flood the barge to bring it down to get the offload successful, jumped ship. He missed his family. He spent about a year on the water, and nobody told us. We showed up that night. Instead of being 3 feet off the water, the barge was 30 feet off the water. So what they did was they pushed all the barrels that we had tied into flotation barrels and things. We had 7 rafts, and we pushed them into the water. And then we had 3 Zodiacs, and the Zodiac is a boat like this. Okay, you know what a Zodiac is, a rubber thing.
Big inflatable.
It's got twin motors on the back. We had twin Yamaha 160s, I think. And the Filipino crew, instead of picking it up, there was a crane on the ship. Instead of picking the Zodiac up and taking it and setting it into the water like this, they picked it up by the front of it, and they brought it over the side with the 2 motors, and they dipped it into the salt water. We couldn't start the engines. We just had to leave it there. It was just a bust.
Wow. And that's what it was. It was those Zodiacs sitting there. I mean, and I can't imagine the feeling when you get there, see it 30 feet off the ground. And then when you go to turn that switch, like everybody's done it with their car, but there's not usually like $1 billion worth of hash inside the car, right? So, things from there, I mean, again, the clip, I put it up in the 7 days, story. A marine biologist in St. Lawrence,
they were whale
Seaway.
watching the next morning and found it.
Whale watchers the next day find barrels packed with 55-gallon drums filled with hash, which I'm sure there are quite a few whale watching, much more exciting whale watch than the usual. And I don't know how else you go on whale watches if you're not smoking hash. But So how do things progress from there? Because, you guys end up getting found out, right?
Yeah, when the offload went down that night, we left 54 tons floating in the Seaway, but we brought 8 tons in because we knew we were going to have to pay the lawyers. We knew there was going to be a problem.
Yeah.
So we got this little boat and went out and hauled in 8 tons. And we had these buses that were, they were like Greyhound buses, but they were luxury buses made for hauling hash. So we put the 8 tons in one of the buses that next day, and there were helicopters flying all over the property and planes because they had found the hashish up there. It's the largest hashish seizure in
Canadian
Canada.
history. Yeah.
So Steve and I are driving the bus back with the 8 tons on this. There's only one road in, one road out. We must have passed 30, 40 cop cars coming up to the property.
All zooming up
up to the property. And planes and helicopters, and we just drove it back. So we made it away. We got away with the 8 tons.
Man. Well, they're up there, property again, like you said, property, there's names, there's, it seemed like part of the original interview that you had given, you ended up originally getting in trouble by the Canadian authorities, right? Mm-hmm. That was the first time you were incarcerated,
we were arrested in the United States and we were extradited to Canada.
Okay. Yeah,
and we did 3 years up there in Canada for 54 tons. And then down here, they gave me 27 years for...
Wow.
But we flipped it over on appeal and we got it down to 18 years. So I ended up doing 19 years, 10 months.
19 years, 10 months
for something
total.
that's legal nowadays.
For something that is now legal, which again, I want to get to at the end because that's, your perspective on this, I think, is one that nobody else has. And, which, especially as we transition to this new world where, this is going to be like this at some point in the near future.
Pretty much is now.
It pretty much is now, yeah. Well, and especially in Canada. Ironically.
Yeah. And we owe a lot of this freedom that's going on in this world to Dr. Bob, who's sitting out here today. He was like a forerunner to open up the whole world to what cannabis is and what it does and how it heals people and everything. And we owe him a debt of gratitude.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Dr. Bob in the house.
Dr. Bob.
We'll be talking with Dr. Bob again very soon, actually, I think next week.
Yeah, he's doing an interview next week, yeah.
We'll be talking with Dr. Bob for sure. Well, and, generally speaking, there was a lot of, I can't imagine the amount of just sort of hate and ignorance and sort of naivete, back then with kind of the mainstream. Mm-hmm. And now there's so many more people consuming cannabis and, the impression of it's totally changed, but back then, it's really still not much of a joke. The Canadians gave you largest smuggling bust in history. The Canadians gave you 3 years.
Yeah, and they called it a soft drug. They said when they sentenced us, the judge said, "Oh, we're sentencing them because it's a soft drug." But down here it's still Schedule 1. It's like heroin. Heroin and pot are no different here in the United States.
Well, and if you look at, it's hard to know all the consequences downstream 100%, right? Mm-hmm. But when you look at the different approaches, and you see at least even the Canadians back then treating it as a soft drug, you guys weren't violent criminals. Mm-hmm. And I'm curious, what was the treatment like when you were in jail in Canada? Because everybody had heard of you, I'm sure. Yeah, I'm sure it was huge news up there, right? Was it kind of and I guess what was the sort of experience like? Is it hard...
We smoked hash every day.
In the prison?
Yeah, every day. And the guards were fine about it. And they actually, they're a strong union in Canada, the prison guards. And they actually petitioned the government to allow the inmates to smoke hash in jail because they're much more calm. Yeah. There's not a lot of problems that go on up there when the hash is distributed in the prison.
Yeah, it sounds, to be honest, I think for most of us in this room it makes a lot more sense.
Yeah, the difference between incarceration in Canada and incarceration in the United States is the United States warehouses. Canada, they have compassion. They have, most people that come in prison are really kind of dysfunctional. They don't even know how to do their own laundry. They can't keep a checkbook. And the Canadian system teaches you all that. It's really, they're just a complete different set of people up there, values.
Yeah. And sounds like...
Down here, it's just warehousing. Yeah. They just warehouse you.
Well, and I know out of state, too. This is a big issue right now and has been for a long time, is people in Vermont, being sent to prisons out of state, private for-profit prisons. for you, when we were talking last week, you know, and sort of you told me about kind of when you realized you were screwed. Share that story, because you know you spend that time in Canada. Yeah. Everybody knows about you. You know, Peter Frayne interviews you. You know, at some point, and then like you said, you get extradited down here and have Uncle Sam really throw the books at you. Again, you know, that interview was huge, and I remember at least growing up being aware of, you know, being aware of this. What was that reception like in Vermont when you kind of got back?
Well, I remember that I was when we first got arrested here in Vermont. I was, and to me, really, this isn't bragging or anything, but to me, it's like what we did for a living. It wasn't any big deal. You know, we lost 54 tons, or we did. It wasn't like overwhelming. And I remember the first day, or the second, third day in jail. I was telling you the story. I'm at St. Albans. I'm in there, and I'm with 3 or 4 or 5 of my co-defendants. And I noticed there's this younger kid. He keeps looking at me, and I'm walking around the yard out there, and he keeps looking. Finally, he walks up and he goes, "Are you Mr. Greer?" I said, "Yes, I am." He says, "Could I shake your hand?" I said, "Yes, you may." And I shake his hand, and he looked me in the eye, and he said, "You're more famous than Pablo Escobar." And when he said that, at that very moment, I knew I was going to go to prison for a long time. That's when I knew that, holy shit.
Yeah, this is a big deal.
I didn't think it was that big.
Well, you know, and anybody else who's reading, anybody who read that 7 Days article with a careful eye, like I see the name Tom Anderson on there. Yeah. Today, he was then a state's attorney, I believe. Today, Tom Anderson
he was a federal prosecutor.
Federal prosecutor. Yes. Today, he is in charge of the Department of Public Safety in the state of Vermont, and technically oversees the entire Vermont medical marijuana program.
What a mistake that is.
I don't want to. I know. We'll save expletives for next week with Dr. Bob. I know how he feels about
Thank
that.
You, Bob.
You know, but things coming full circle, and you see sort of how part of why our policies are what they are, and you know, think about who's involved and like inherent biases. You know, the guy that got his ass burned by you for 15 years, you know, probably doesn't have a real, you know, balanced approach to cannabis reforms. So, you know, you go through this process. I mean, and it's a long period. What would you know? I guess kind of, you know, there's so much discord because you're treating this. You're with people who are mostly treating this professional. You know, like you said, when you got busted, it wasn't like they're going to come chop off your family's heads. You know, it's not like the mob shit you see on TV and in movies and stuff. It's kind of regular business, but you're facing consequences that are worse than, you know, people who have done terrible things and killed people. How were you able to kind of, the hash policy in American jails probably not as loose.
Oh God, no, not at all.
You know, kind of how do you stay sane while you're going through this, knowing kind of what the, you know, with the difference between the punishment, I guess, and the crime, you know, and kind of dealing with that?
Well, for me, it was, you know, when I got sentenced to the original 27 years, I said, you know what, I can either do hard time or I can do easy time. You know, it's all in your mindset. And I decided that I was going to be in a monastery for the next 27 years. And that's how I kind of put it in my head. And that's how I did my time. But I got it down to 18 years. So I honestly can say I never did one bad day in prison. No, I never had one bad day. You know, it's all in just controlling your environment and your thoughts and your feelings. And that's how it was for me in prison. Like sitting here is no different than being in prison right now.
Yeah, I mean, thank you. No offense taken, Billy. No, thanks. Appreciate it.
Eli, didn't mean it that way.
It's all right. Well, let's come full circle, because we are sitting here present day.
We are.
It's a lot more fun. I got literally a huge weed plant next to me.
Beautiful.
Grew legally in our studio, which is
fantastic.
Much nicer than prison, thanks to Jam Creative here.
Yeah.
You know, present day, we met through legal cannabis, CBD hemp, Greenleaf Central, our friend Joey here, who you guys need to go see. Red Square, the alley off of Church Street. If you guys know where Ake's Place and Red Square is, you know where Greenleaf Central is. Yeah. Just pop down that alley.
He's got great supply. He's got everything there. He's a fantastic shop.
Oh, yeah. Well, and he'll tell you a few stories, too, if you go back there. Just pull the string and get Uncle Joey going.
Yeah.
So let's bring it, you know, present day. Canada's legal. What you've been watching that process. What do you think about watching that unfold? I mean, I guess a no-brainer, because your experience with Canadians was always their kind of common sense people, right? So did you think this was kind of just a matter of time?
Oh, Canada? Absolutely. Absolutely. Dr. Bob's been telling me for years the pendulum started about 15 years ago. He said the pendulum started swinging back, and they're not going to stop it. And sure enough, It's great. I just love it. You know?
Yeah, I mean, going up there to Montreal and although I have not heard great things. I have a friend who just went up there, and shout out to Ben Dabin over there.
Oh, yeah?
So the quality was not necessarily great in the dispensaries, but I say this part of Montreal, it's like shitty weed is a hallmark of Montreal trip, you know? It's like, that's why you got to get the hash.
Yeah.
That M39, you know? That's
the M39.
That's Montreal history.
Yeah. I actually started smuggling, I think I was probably not bragging, but I was the first one to start bringing down the indoors from Canada. Back
when they were those, I guess it's kind of when Beasters probably first came out, right?
Yeah,
that dense hydro stuff.
It started, and then it just grew. I was actually doing that during the trial. I was smuggling I was sitting in federal trial during the day and smuggling the border at night.
Well, it's quite a picture. I mean, and they paint quite a picture. You know, I think the Reader's Digest story was the swaggering smuggler.
Yeah.
You know, but again, if you think about the discord, and this is not to, you know, to glamorize things for the sake of doing it. It's for the sake of the reality versus the, you know, versus the laws and versus kind of the paradigm at that time. And now it's coming back full circle where, like, you know, I hope at some point somebody's going to name a strain after you if they haven't already. Like you're one of those people that needs to have a strain named after them. What do you think about that? Yeah, sure. You guys can give that up in the audience. Yeah.
You know,
I feel like some Billy Greer in the morning, maybe some Dr. Bob at night before
there you go. Perfect. The other way around.
Yeah. On some Uncle Joey if you never want to sleep.
Yeah, of course.
You know, mix that in.
You know, the CBD world has really opened up the legalization. It's opened up a lot of people's eyes to what THC, what good cannabis is. It's really helped a lot, the CBD world. I'm so happy and proud of CBD and what people are doing out there now.
Well, and we were talking before, you know, we got, you know, these fields that you used to be smuggling through back in the day are now people growing hemp up there in Franklin County for Colomon.
Absolutely.
And I want to give those guys a shout out as well.
Yeah, I'm a consultant for Colomon and Chris Santee and Stevie Pollock. And why I decided to go with those guys is because Chris has two visions. He's got a 2-point vision. Number one is they want to help the Vermont farmers to make a lot of money. And number two is they want to help sick people. So that's why I like hanging out with Colomon. They're good guys. They grew 53 acres of hemp this year. They've got a lab in Colchester. They're making salves and oils. And they're just really a nice, wonderful, loving group of people that are behind Colomon. Yeah.
I love it. Well, and they just posted on our Facebook too on Saturday on 4/20.
Yeah.
They're doing an event up there in St. Albans.
Yeah, they are at Farmers Market or something.
Yeah, and I think they're doing like a whole informational. It's free to attend. Yeah. So especially people who are out there who are farmers, no farmers, anybody with land, go talk to those guys.
Yeah, and anybody that's sick, like if they have cancer, they're sick, veterans, and they can't afford CBD pills or something, Colomon will give them to them for free.
All right.
So
beautiful. Well, we definitely appreciate that. What are your thoughts? I mean, you've been watching the end of Prohibition here in Vermont. You're somebody who had to take, you know, the brunt of the consequences in this state. Does it kind of blow your mind? I mean, any familiar faces out there? You know, I mean, I'm not going to ask you to implicate people who are all involved back in the day, but what are your thoughts seeing people, you know, rally for it, rally against it, and legalization happen in Vermont? And I guess what do you want to see? How do you want to see it move forward with the THC stuff?
Well, what I would like to see is just all cannabis to be legal, no restrictions on it. We want to pay taxes, we pay taxes. It's like a farmer selling his corn.
Right.
So that's what I really would like to see, myself personally.
And do you think? You know, I do know that transportation license is one of the ones they're talking about with tax and regulate. Would you be interested in being, maybe not that one, but professional, you know, in a legal cannabis business in the future? Are we going to
possibly?
We're going to see possibly.
Everything's open. I do get a lot of offers for things.
I bet. Well, like we said, I know we got a lot of badass breeders out here, so. I promise, if you guys bring us all your best bud, we'll make sure Billy tries it all. He can choose the one that he wants to be the lead strain.
Yeah. Perfect.
Billy, I want to thank you again, man. This has been awesome.
Well, listen, thank you for having me.
I talk about this forever.
It's
amazing, and I thank Joey and Greenleaf Central again for helping
Joey's
bring
the best,
us together.
Dr. Bob, and everybody that's here, and Laura for having us.
Laura, if you guys are into yoga, I think Laura's going to be doing yoga on Sunday morning. All right, she nodded, so now she's on the hook for it. So stay tuned for that St. Patty's Day. Come hang out with all of us in Winooski. We'll have a lot of good people here. Big thank you again to Jam Creative for hosting us here. We're going to be hanging out here a little bit longer tonight.
Perfect.
And all of you guys can hang out with us, becoming Heady Vermont members, business partners, sign up for the newsletters. Check it out. We will see you guys all soon. Big thank you to Eli Favreau. He's leaving us tonight, his last live production. And our director, Sean Simonetti, behind the decks there.
All right.
Really impressive. Local dude. He's still in college. This guy's going to be an engineer.
Great.
This is just a side gig.
Fantastic.
It's crazy. Thank you guys for coming. Thanks for tuning in.
Thanks again, Eli.
We'll
Appreciate
be posting
it,
the Insider. Oh, no way, man. This is great. We'll hang out. So thank you guys for tuning in. We'll see you all again soon. In the meantime, elevate the state. Peace.
That was good.
Yeah.